Welcome to my latest batch of mini reviews where I basically review 7 films in the time that it would normally take me to review just one. The only difference today from the previous 2 episodes is that I'm going to give a score for each film as we're going along. I didn't do that in the first 2 episodes because I just didn't think that I needed to, but for some reason when I was looking at my notes for these films yesterday, I found myself thinking about scores for each one. So I thought, you know what, sod it, I'll put some scores in. I'm not going to get the axes out 7 times in the space of 15 minutes, but I can at least say the scores as I'm going along. The only other thing to say is that I will be talking about these films in the exact order that I watched them over the past couple of weeks. There are good films in here, there are bad films, there are old films, there are new films, there's quite a variety. So let's get into it, starting with this one. This is an early Dario Argento film. It's a giallo, of course it is. It's about a guy who accidentally kills somebody in a theatre or somewhere, but somebody else witnesses the murder, so they start blackmailing this guy and being a complete nuisance, and then there are additional murders throughout the film. I found some elements of this story a little bit hard to believe, a little bit of a stretch, and I wasn't massively pleased with the reveal of who the killer turns out to be. But the death of the killer at the end is really spectacularly good. I enjoyed that. It's an enthralling little horror slash thriller. It's not Argento at his best. Obviously, this is very early on, so he hadn't yet perfected his formula. He would go on to be better, but there are still flashes of his talent to see here. And I would absolutely buy this. I wouldn't feel like I was just doing it to complete the Argento portion of my shelf or anything. So if you like Italian films, if you like Gallo films, then by all means give Four Flies on Grey Velvet a chance. 3 out of 5 for this one. Gags the Clown. Gags is a clown who is walking around a city at night time. I think it might be Chicago, but I could be wrong about that. But he's not actually killing everybody he comes across. He's just kind of there, sort of scaring people. So people have taken videos of this guy and put them on Facebook and stuff. And before long, Gags has a bit of a media following. He's got news crews sort of going around trying to catch a glimpse of him, and he's regularly making, the local news shows and stuff. You've got half the city who think he's a really cool thing, a symbol of the city, a lucky mascot, somebody to be cherished. And then the other half of the city think that he's a bit of a crackpot and he's needlessly scaring people and he needs to stop what he's doing. I think this was something which happened in real life a few years ago in America and in England. You had this phase of time where people went out dressed as in clown costumes and just started scaring people with their presence. But I don't think it happens anymore. The trouble with this film is that it's clear from the first 5 minutes that Gags is a supernatural entity, and that just took a lot of the creep factor out of it for me. I think this would have been a fascinating film if Gags had actually been human, but sadly not. I think it would make a pretty good Terrifier film, actually, if in one of them he got noticed by the press and they thought he was just a harmless clown walking around at night, but that's a conversation for another day. There are some annoying characters in this film. There's one guy who runs his own sort of YouTube channel and he's completely anti-Gags, and he sort of gets a handgun out and decides to go and hunt him with this friend of his holding the camera behind him. And as amusing as this guy was at first, he became really irritating by the second half of the film. So I kind of watched Gags the Clown in a fairly nonplussed way. I didn't really enjoy it that much. And my main gripe was just the supernatural thing. I just don't think this film suited being that. 1.5 out of 5 for this one. If you saw my previous mini reviews episodes, you'll know that I reviewed the original Grave Encounters. I really enjoyed that. This sequel is nowhere near as good, sadly. It just feels too samey. I think if they'd have gone to a different location each time in this series, it would have been a lot better. But by the time the new characters in this one turn up at the same asylum as the previous film, I kind of just thought to myself, I've already seen this, I don't really want to watch it again. They do try and shake things up with a couple of twists and variations on what we had before, but it's just not enough. And there's this character who comes back from the first film who's just really annoying this time around. And the main character in Grave Encounters 2 makes a really selfish decision towards the end of this film, which just, I mean, that was the point of the film where it lost me. So, not a fan of this one. I'm going to give it 2 out of 5. It's still more enjoyable than Gags the Clown. But if you didn't watch my previous episode, then I must reiterate the first film, the first Grave Encounters, is really good and should be watched. Not so much this one. I saw this at the cinema last week. I wasn't a massive fan of the original. I thought it was decent but not great. And this second effort kind of falls into the same category, really. It never quite got my blood pumping, it never got my heart racing, despite the fact that some of the action and situations are quite enjoyable. But in all honesty, on the way home from the cinema, I was thinking more about the trailers I'd seen before the film than the actual film. It was an amazing set of trailers. The Lighthouse, Candyman, Malignant. I don't think I've ever seen such a great bunch of trailers back to back to back. But in terms of Don't Breathe 2, I'm going to give it a score of 2.5 out of 5, which is actually okay. It's just that with the reputation of this little mini franchise being so good, I kind of would have expected better, and I just didn't get that. So I just don't think these films are for me. But this film is still okay. It's enjoyable. This is a very simple setup about two blokes who have to man a lighthouse together for a whole month, but they psychologically start to unravel as the weeks go by. And then, just to make things worse, bad weather means that the shift changeover boat can't come and pick them up. So they end up doing even longer on this island than they should have done. And it's implied at a certain point as well that both of these characters might have been a little bit crazy anyway at the time that this shift began. So there will be blood, you can guarantee that. It is a little bit of a slow burn getting there, but this is such a well shot film. It's in black and white, but it looks terrific. The ending could be interpreted in different ways, which might frustrate some people, but I found it interesting, and there are certainly talking points to be had in this film, like the bizarre light at the top of the lighthouse, which may be something more, and we never quite find out. I'm going to give this film 3.5 out of 5, which I think is the best score we've had today so far. Although I do prefer Robert Eggers' other famous film that he did, The Witch. So this is the video's hidden gem. This is a real diamond in a haystack. It is a found footage film, which might put some people off, but I like that particular subgenre. The story concerns 5 youngsters who are going to stay in one of their parents' houses in the woods somewhere. It's sort of implied that it's about an hour from Manhattan, maybe. It's snowing in this film, by the way, which provides for a really great aesthetic. But the terror begins before these characters have even got to their destination. There's a strange van which may or may not be following them, and I was really on the edge of my seat wondering what the guy in this van was up to. It sort of reminds me of Steven Spielberg's Duel, these early scenes. And then there's a segment in the middle which is reminiscent of the Blair Witch Project, but in the very best possible way. Some people might think that the film takes too long to get to the actiony, stalk and slashy bits, but I thought it was just fine. The tension throughout this film is incredible. Even after it was over, I went to bed and I could still sort of feel my heart rate and my heart speed a little bit faster than it should have been. Seriously, I'm going to give this film 4.5 out of 5. It's one of the best found footage films I've seen ever, really. It's really good. I'm surprised I've never heard of it before. I've ordered a copy of it on DVD. It was only £2, brand new. I don't know how people make a profit when it's that cheap, but I kind of feel a little bit guilty actually that I'm only doing a mini review of this and not being that person who gives it a lot of love and puts out a big review of it. But maybe at some point in the future I will do. This is another film which takes a long time to get going, but I don't think that approach works as well for this film as it did for Evil Things. The story is about a babysitter who basically finds out that the family paying her actually want to sacrifice her as part of some kind of ritualistic offering. But the payoff that you get in the finale is just not worth the journey to get there. The film does have a nice 70s look. I did really like the main character, the main girl, and the whole film feels like it's very competently directed, but I just don't think they had the ideas for this. It's very bare bones. I was kind of nonplussed at the end. I was like, is that it? So not really one I would recommend. It's okay. I'd give it a 2 out of 5. So that brings me to the end of my mini reviews for today. I will be back hopefully for another episode very soon. Until next time, ta-ra.